Okay, so you want to own a cafe, find a cozy location, buy an espresso machine, serve fresh coffee and warm pastries. Watch customers fill every table while the register keeps ringing. Sounds like an amazing business, except there's one problem. Selling coffee is rarely what makes a cafe successful. Because in the cafe business, you're not really selling coffee, you're selling time, convenience, routine, and a place people choose to return to again and again. The coffee just happens to be the excuse. That's why two cafes can sit on the same street, sell nearly identical drinks, and yet one is packed from sunrise to sunset while the other quietly disappears within a year. So what separates them? To answer that, we need to go back to where cafes first became something much bigger than a place to grab a drink. Centuries ago, coffee houses spread across cities in the Middle East and later throughout Europe. They quickly evolved into gathering places where merchants negotiated deals, politicians debated ideas, writers drafted stories, and travelers exchanged news. Long before smartphones connected the world, cafes connected people. That role never truly disappeared. Today, billions of cups of coffee are consumed every year, making coffee one of the world's most valuable agricultural commodities. But surprisingly, the beans themselves represent only a small fraction of what customers pay for. Walk into a cafe and order a $5 latte. It feels like you're paying for coffee. In reality, the beans inside that cup might cost only a few cents. So where does the rest of the money go? First comes the milk, syrups, cups, lids, napkins, and stirrers. Then there's labor. Every drink requires someone to grind the beans, steam the milk, prepare the order, clean the equipment, and serve the customer. And then comes the biggest expense of them all: rent. Successful cafes fight for locations with heavy foot traffic because convenience often matters more than quality. A customer rushing to work may happily buy a good cup of coffee nearby instead of walking another 15 minutes for a perfect one. That makes location one of the most expensive investments a cafe owner will ever make. But even after paying rent, utilities, insurance, equipment financing, maintenance, wages, taxes, and marketing, there's another problem. Coffee isn't purchased evenly throughout the day. Most sales happen during the morning rush. For a few hours, the cafe feels overwhelmed. Then suddenly, everything slows down. Tables stay occupied by customers working on laptops, reading books, or holding meetings, sometimes after buying only a single drink. From the customer's perspective, it's a relaxing atmosphere. From the owner's perspective, those occupied seats generate almost no additional revenue. Every chair has an earning limit. If one customer occupies it for 4 hours after purchasing a single latte, that seat can't generate income from someone else. This is why many cafes quietly redesign their layouts, adjust Wi-Fi policies, or introduce food menus that encourage additional purchases. Because increasing revenue isn't always about attracting more customers. Sometimes it's simply about earning a little more from the customers already inside. That leads to another surprising reality. Most cafes don't make their best margins on black coffee. Specialty drinks often generate significantly higher profits. Adding flavored syrups, whipped cream, cold foam, seasonal toppings, or premium milk alternatives increases the selling price far more than it increases the production cost. A simple espresso might produce a modest profit. A customized iced caramel latte with oat milk and cold foam can generate considerably more. And that's before a customer adds a pastry, sandwich, or dessert. Suddenly, a single visit that began with coffee becomes a much larger transaction. Which raises an interesting question. If coffee alone isn't the real business, then what exactly is the product customers keep coming back for? The answer becomes much clearer once you look behind the counter instead of across it. Every cafe owner quickly learns that customers don't all behave the same way. Some rush in every morning, order the exact same drink, and leave within 3 minutes. Others stay for hours. Some only visit on weekends. Others become part of the furniture, showing up so consistently that the staff knows their order before they even reach the register. That last group is incredibly valuable because in the cafe business, loyalty is worth far more than a single expensive purchase. Imagine someone spending $6 every weekday. It doesn't sound remarkable, but over an entire year, that one customer could easily spend more than $1,500. Multiply that by hundreds of regulars, and suddenly a neighborhood cafe has built something much more predictable than random daily sales. It's created recurring demand. That's why loyalty apps, rewards programs, and prepaid balances have become such powerful tools. They're not just marketing gimmicks. They're designed to make choosing one cafe easier than considering another. The less customers think, the more often they return, but repeat customers alone aren't enough. A cafe also has to survive one of its biggest hidden challenges: waste. Coffee beans lose freshness, milk expires, pastries don't last forever. Fresh sandwiches have limited shelf lives. Order too little, and customers leave disappointed. Order too much, and perfectly good inventory ends up in the trash. Finding that balance is one of the hardest parts of running the business. Experienced owners constantly study sales patterns, rainy mornings, holiday weekends, school schedules, nearby office occupancy. Even local construction projects can noticeably change customer traffic, because predicting tomorrow's demand is almost as important as serving today's customers. Then there's the equipment. Customers see a beautiful espresso machine. Owners see a machine that costs tens of thousands of dollars, requires regular maintenance, consumes electricity all day, and can instantly halt sales if it breaks during the morning rush. Every minute without espresso during peak hours means lost revenue. That's why successful cafes treat maintenance almost like insurance. Preventing problems is usually far cheaper than fixing them. But perhaps the biggest misconception is that large drink prices automatically mean huge profits. They don't. Labor costs continue rising in many markets. Rent rarely gets cheaper. Utilities increase. Coffee bean prices fluctuate depending on weather, harvests, shipping costs, and global demand. A drought thousands of miles away can eventually make your morning latte more expensive. That's because coffee is grown in relatively few regions around the world. Countries like Brazil, Vietnam, Colombia, and Ethiopia play enormous roles in supplying the global market. If harvests fall or transportation becomes more expensive, cafes everywhere eventually feel the pressure. Some absorb those costs, others raise prices. Neither decision is painless. Raise prices too aggressively, and customers may simply walk next door. Keep prices too low, and profit quietly disappears. This balancing act becomes even more difficult when competing against giant chains. Large brands purchase enormous quantities of coffee, negotiate better supplier contracts, spread marketing costs across thousands of stores, and benefit from recognizable names. Independent cafes rarely win by being bigger. They win by being different. Some roast their own beans. Some focus on specialty brewing methods. Others build communities around local events, live music, art exhibitions, or remote workspaces. They transform the cafe into a destination instead of just another stop for caffeine. And that's becoming increasingly important, because today's customers often choose cafes for reasons that have nothing to do with coffee. Business meetings, study sessions, first dates, job interviews, freelance work, social gatherings. The drink starts the visit. The atmosphere justifies staying. Which explains why owners obsess over lighting, furniture, music, temperature, speed of service, and even the scent inside the store. They're carefully designing an experience that customers may never consciously notice, but almost always remember, and that experience may be the most profitable item on the menu. But even the perfect atmosphere can't guarantee success, because eventually every cafe owner faces the same question. How do you keep growing when there are only so many cups of coffee you can sell in a day? The answer is surprisingly simple. You stop thinking like a cafe owner and start thinking like a brand. Look at the world's biggest coffee chains. Coffee is still important, but it's no longer the entire business. They've expanded into packaged beans, bottled drinks, reusable tumblers, seasonal merchandise, gift cards, mobile ordering, subscriptions, and delivery. Every one of those products creates another way to earn revenue without adding more seats to the cafe. Independent cafes are beginning to follow the same strategy. Many sell their own roasted beans online. Some offer brewing equipment for home use. Others host coffee workshops, tasting events, or barista classes. These aren't just extra services, they're additional income streams that aren't limited by the number of tables inside the shop. Technology is changing the business too. A growing number of customers order before they even arrive. Mobile apps reduce waiting times, encourage repeat purchases, and collect valuable data about buying habits. Owners can see which drinks sell best, which hours are busiest, and which promotions actually increase sales instead of simply giving away discounts. Data has quietly become one of the most valuable ingredients in the business. Then came another lesson the entire industry couldn't ignore. When the pandemic swept across the world, cafes that depended entirely on people sitting inside suddenly watched their sales collapse almost overnight. The businesses that adapted the fastest often survived. They expanded takeout, partnered with delivery platforms, sold coffee subscriptions, offered family-sized beverage packs. Some even converted part of their stores into small retail spaces selling beans, brewing equipment, and local products. The crisis reminded owners of a painful truth. A cafe built around only one source of income is far more fragile than one with several. But even after everything we've discussed, there's still one final secret. People rarely remember the best cup of coffee they've ever had. They remember how a place made them feel. Maybe it was where they landed their first job, where they met an old friend after years apart, where they studied late into the night before an important exam, or where they spent quiet mornings planning their future. Over time, the cafe becomes part of someone's routine, and routines are incredibly powerful. Breaking a routine takes effort. Keeping one is easy. That's why the most successful cafes don't compete on coffee alone. They compete for a permanent place in people's daily lives. Of course, running one is never easy. Margins are often thin. Competition is intense. Consumer tastes constantly evolve. One poor location, rising rent, inconsistent quality, or a slowdown in customer traffic can quickly turn a profitable business into a struggling one. Yet, despite all those risks, new cafes continue opening every single year. Because when everything works together, the location, the service, the products, the atmosphere, and the community, a cafe becomes far more than a place that serves drinks. It becomes a habit, a meeting place, a workspace, a neighborhood landmark, and sometimes even a small part of people's lives. So, is owning a cafe a great business? It certainly can be. But not because coffee is expensive, not because espresso machines are impressive, and not because customers are willing to pay $6 for a latte. A successful cafe thrives because it understands something far more valuable. The product isn't just the coffee in the cup. It's the experience that brings people back for another one tomorrow. And in the end, that's the real business of owning a cafe.